from why he just popped up on the scene, why this guy who's a failed artist, failed leader, couldn't even elevate his rank past, I think it was private or something, because he just couldn't lead people. Wasn't a soldier, and he becomes the Fuhrer. We find that he's got a little pedigree in him, and we're going to talk a little bit about where that comes from. But we're just going to pick up in Tragedy and Hope on page 435, just to recapture a little thought. Adolf Hitler basically is establishing himself in the Workers' Party. He realizes that he has to gain his control or power not through literally a coup d'etat, so to speak, but he's got to establish his power through legal means. As a consequence of this event, speaking of this party that he's become a part of, the control that he now has, the fact that they've established a form of stormtroopers. As a consequence of the events, the essay, which is talking about these stormtroopers, were reorganized under Rome. The word socialism in the party name was interpreted to mean nationalism, or a society without class conflicts. So I want you to understand, and you always hear me say this, but I want this to sink in, and I want us to understand that language is everything. The words that are spoken mean everything. If they can convince you that socialism means classless society, that everybody is the same, if the wording is changed in the minds of people, you can control them. This is why, even in today's language, we have this political correctness that literally is gone from one end of the continent to the other, but this political correctness has us not even wanting to say certain things. And the reason we don't say these things is because there's a fear of repercussion, a fear of persecution. Like, before they used to say, if you're a homosexual, you got a problem. But if you point that out, then they say, oh, you're homophobic. So now who has a problem? Huh? You got one guy that doesn't know input from output, and then you become a homophobic. So who's the sick one? Huh? The guy that doesn't know what input-output is, or the guy who knows what it is? So language means everything. If you can change the meaning of things and have the mainstream people accept it or at least acknowledge it, you can control the minds. So Hitler says, I've got to take power lawfully. I've got to take power through policy. I've got to go through channels to do this so that I can be accepted. Thus he takes the notion of socialism and he says it means classless society. It means there's not going to be a bourgeoisie. There's not going to be a high class. There's not going to be a middle class. And there's not going to be the disenfranchised low class. Everybody's the same, and we're all going to be National Socialists. And I'm going to be the guy on top that doles it out and makes sure everybody gets their fair share. You always hear me speaking of language. Language is important. The words that are used are very important. That's why, my wife and I, she tells me, why do you say the things you say? Because you understand them. If I say the things the way I say them, is because that's the things that get said. That's how you understand. You know exactly what I mean. You don't think Jesus had other words he could have used than saying, salt that's lost its savor is meat for the dunghill? You don't think there were nicer words to use? Huh? It's not what goes in your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes out of your heart. That which goes in comes out in the drought. Why did he have to describe that biological function? Huh? Goes in the mouth, out the poop chute is what he said. That's what he said. Why do you have to bring that up? Because he didn't want there to be any mistake over what he was saying. Paul says the same thing, a little nicer. Taste not, touch not, handle not, which all perish with the using. Why are you in bondage to something that you eat or drink now that only disappears in 10 minutes? Huh? That's why somebody said, you don't drink beer, you rent beer. Or you don't buy it, you rent it. Goes in, comes out. Hitler recognizes that what he's got to do is manipulate and change the minds of the people. And how do you do that? You do it through words. You do it through policy. And if you've got people speaking the same words, what happens? You've changed the minds of the people. Right? So if you say something like, boy, those Hispanics in that neighborhood, crime's going up, and somebody says, you're a bigot. what happens to crime in that community? It stays up. Who suffers? The people that live there. There's certain words that you can't say anymore. You can't associate ethnics with crime anymore. People get mad. They'll say, how do you defend yourself when they say, you're a racist? Huh? Now, the whole rationale behind this is what? And again, I say this to people I think that have sat under me long enough to understand that what we're doing is we're dealing with the way Babylon works. We're dealing with the way the devil works. Before you can take over, before you can establish any socialism, any cult of socialism, you have to first take the root or take the minds of the people. And Hitler very simply says, I got to find a way to take power. First of all, I'm going to redefine socialism. Socialism means no classes. Now, in this country, people call it equality. But what does equality mean? It means no classes. Why are there poor people? Because they don't work. Why are there poor people? Because they didn't choose to go to school. Why are there poor people? Because they don't choose to wake up in the morning and go to work. Why are they poor people? Because they've made poor choices. Now listen, this is the USA. I don't care what you've heard about it. You get $50, you go to college. But everybody says, we want equality. What does equality mean today? Huh? You know, in our society, people think equality means we're all the same. And we've gone over that argument several times. We're not all the same. That's not what it means. So what's the difference between Hitler saying socialism means life with no classes? And the people at the bottom, what do they say? Hip, hip, hooray! And what do the rich people say? Boo! Right? And the people in the middle, what do they say? Oh, we're going to stay the same. What does equality do to a nation? When a politician stands up and starts talking equality, what happens? Why are they changing why do they change the meanings of these words? And why do they start to spread across society the way they do? The devil doesn't play games. Listen, I'm telling you right now, the devil has not changed his tactics. The devil has not changed his tools, but the church has just never caught on. The church doesn't understand this. It drives me crazy that even the early church had established definitions and meanings. And despite the fact that they did it through canons and through councils, they did in fact establish in their minds what thus saith the Lord was. Suddenly from the 60s on in, you've got churches redefining. Not just the canons, but redefining even the Word of God. I mean, even those idiots who run around saying Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. Do you have any idea where that whole idea or where that whole notion of relationship came from? Huh? It came from the breakdown in the 60s when the family became the unit that was now obsolete. It came from the idea that she doesn't have to be my wife. We're in relationship. Huh? Yeah, me and Dan Zan work together. We're in relationship. Now, how many times do you hear the word relationship in church today? Huh? We're in relationship. What's relationship mean? Oh, that we're relating. We're together. We're on the same page. That whole notion. Christianity is not a religion. It's a relationship. Baloney. It's not a relationship. Christianity is family. God is my father. I'm his son. There's a difference between being a son and just being a relation. I don't want to be a relation to God. I want to be his son. But you got the church running around talking about relationship. We've got to establish relationship. And they're running around. Everything is relationship. Everything is networking. Everything is, bonding. And everything is doing all that other crap. What does the Bible say to do? That we're brethren. How wonderful, how beautiful is the fellowship of the brethren. What is it? It's fellowship, having in common one with the other. But instead we're playing games with words of the zeitgeist of the age. that completely change the meaning and the intention of what God desires. And I'm hoping that as a church that at least sits and has some intelligence, you at least understand these things, because if you don't, you get carried with every wind of doctrine. This is why the churches are running around talking about relationships. This is why the church is running around, and one of the big ones in the church right now is integrity. How much integrity did Abraham have? He gave his wife to 2 different kings. You lay with her. I don't want to die. Huh? Yes, sir, God, I'll start walking. I'll stop when you say so, but let me take my nephew Lot just in case I die in the wilderness. How much integrity did he have? King David, a man after God's heart, the apple of his eye. Man, he not only laid with Bathsheba, he plotted to kill her husband, and when the plot didn't work, he figured out, I better send him to the front where the enemy will just kill him, get him out of my hair. How much integrity did David have? I'd have to tell you about Peter. How much integrity did he have? He was so dumb and loudmouth, all he ever did was get in trouble every time he shot it off, didn't he? But you got the church running around talking about integrity and character. Hold that standard to anybody in this book and see what happens. Huh? How much character did Peter have? I'll tell you what, I know Peter's character. Every time he opened his mouth, he was stupid. Huh? I know what kind of character Peter had. When the woman said, ain't you one of them? He said, no. I'll tell you what kind of character he had. One minute he's saying, you're the Christ, Son of the living God. Next minute he's saying, be it far from thee. Don't do the will of God. What kind of character did Jesus or did Peter have? Huh? How about the Apostle Paul? One minute he's saying Jesus is the final sacrifice. Next minute he's in Jerusalem being swayed by the religious people, sponsoring people who are going through Nazirite vows and paying for sacrifices to be offered. How much character did Paul have? Huh? What am I telling you? That we're all flawed, that we're all cracked pots, we're all screwed up, and the church is running around talking about character. Why are we talking about character? If you hold up the whole integrity and character issue, what are you really saying? What you're really saying is that we're no better than those Catholic priests. Because what's at stake with all this Catholicism isn't the fact that they got homosexual priests. They got priests that like little boys. Hey, how many of you did you not know that? I knew Ellen DeGeneres was a lesbian. I knew Rosie O'Donnell was a lesbian. I knew priests were homosexuals. Huh? You all heard the stories about the altar boys? Huh? Why do you think they wear robes? This stuff doesn't surprise us. It doesn't shock us. We understood these things. But what's at stake? What is really at stake? Huh? They attack the integrity. Now listen, out of all those priests, how many are perverts? Very few. Now less than 10%. Very few. But they're attacking the whole church from the Pope on down. I'll tell you, there's more homosexuals in politics. Huh? There's more homosexuals there on Capitol Hill on any given day. Huh? Starting with old Barney Franks, huh? Y'all know about Barney? I'm not going to tell you about him. Got these homosexuals. They're all over Capitol Hill. Nobody says anything about those fellas. They got worse perverts over there in Washington than they do in the church. But if the church places itself under the zeitgeist of this world, what happens? You change the meaning of words, and what do? You pull the rug out from under people. You put them under a standard that they can't hold. And Hitler's doing the same thing. As a consequence of this event, the SA was reorganized under Rome. The word socialism in the party name was interpreted to mean nationalism, or a society without class conflicts. Everything's equal. And the equality in party and state were replaced by the leadership principle and the doctrine of the elite. Now, the doctrine of the elite literally means that there's always going to be one that's enlightened. And that enlightenment, and this is what the masses count on. This is what's taking place in our government today. This representative government that's supposed to say, you all elect me and I'll carry out your will, has disappeared. And the people have failed to hold these jackasses accountable. They're not representing you anymore. Far from it. What they're saying is, you've elected me because you trust me to make the right decisions for all of your lame brains. That's what happened to politics today. These guys insult your intelligence and nobody says anything. Well, that's what Hitler's doing. Hitler was convinced he must come to power by legal methods rather than by force. Let's see, now we're reading in 437. The obstacle to extremism was removed on July 20th, 1932, when Hindenburg, by presidential decree based on Article 48, appointed Papen commissioner of Prussia for Prussia. Papen at once dismissed the 8 members of the Prussian parliamentary cabinet and granted their governmental functions to men named by himself. The dismissed ministers were removed from their offices, and Prussia was the largest, I didn't read it, but Prussia was the largest of the German regions. It probably had the ability to exercise more authority and probably become the bigger stumbling block in the way of Hitler's rise to power. So immediately their government is dismantled. They do away with their opposition quickly. The dismissed ministers were removed from their offices by the power of the army, but once challenged the legality of this action before the German Superior Court at Leipzig. By verdict on October 25, 1932, the court decided for the removed officials. In spite of the decision, Hitler, after only 1 week in the chancellorship, was able to obtain from Hindenburg a new decree which removed the Prussian ministers from office once more and conferred their powers on Federal Vice-Chancellor Papen. Control of the police administration was conferred on Hermann Göring. The Nazis already held, though, Wilhelm Frick to control the Reich Ministry of the Interior and thus the national police powers. Thus Hitler, by February 7th, had control of the police powers both of the Reich and of Prussia. Using this advantage, the Nazis began a twofold assault on the opposition. Göring and Frick worked under a cloak of legality from above, while Captain Röhm was in command of the Nazi Party stormtroopers, and they worked without the pretense of legality from below. All uncooperative police officials were retired, removed, or given vacations, and were replaced by Nazi substitutes, usually stormtroop leaders. February 4, 1933, Hindenburg signed an emergency decree that gave the government the right to prohibit and control any meetings, uniforms, or newspapers. This way, most opposition meetings of the newspapers were prevented from reaching the public. So one of the first things that this type of government does is it limits what you hear. It limits what news you're going to have. It limits meetings. And it limits what information you're going to be privy to. And if that information is held from you or withheld from you, then you only know what you know, and that's it. This is why it gets me so upset when I see people protest. This is what gets me so upset, and you've all heard me rant and rave about these political things going on. You got a lot of people that have political opinions, yet they've never read anything. They all want to support Chief Parks, and they don't know anything. They all want to support, Jimmy Hahn, and they don't know nothing about him. They all want to support George W., and they don't know anything about him. They want to support old Al Gore. George W. stole the election. They don't even know how the electorate works. Why are we talking to idiots like that? They don't have any idea, because the dissemination of information is what brings the enlightenment that allows you to function in this system. And as long as this system is secret, and as long as this system is covered, or as long as this system, people just don't care about it because they're too busy doing their thing and fighting whatever problems in front of them, that they never inform themselves. Then unfortunately, either in church, nobody teaches you nothing like this. So you got Hitler taking over. He limits what they hear. He limits the information. He limits any public meetings, but he also has now the power to forbid people from wearing certain uniforms. Now, what's that about? Why would he keep people from wearing certain uniforms? What's up with this uniform thing? See, this is why, to a great extent, even school uniforms bother me. I hate that notion. You know what school uniforms do to kids? It makes them all the same. Somebody says, we're just trying to save your kids from gang violence. If your kid's normal, he ain't ever going to be confused with a gang member. But if your jackass kid shaves his head, wears big pants and giant shirts with gang writing on them, maybe he needs to get shot. Huh? Now, nobody likes to hear that. You may as well paint a target on his belly. Huh? Well, he's really a good boy. Don't let all the tattoos fool you. I don't know who needs to be shot more, him or the parents. But you got these school officials, we're going to save your kids. How are you going to save them? We're going to put them in uniforms. What's that going to do? It's going to make them all the same. Now listen, I don't just like to brag on my kids, but my kids aren't the same as the kids in her school. I look at my kids and say, my kid's better than them. That's just me. My kid doesn't need to look like them. You don't need to lump my kids in with other kids. They're different. They're not like other kids. But you want to dress them the same and give them the impression they're the same when they're not. Is nothing more than following the zeitgeist of this country. And again, the underlying cause of these movements isn't social. It isn't to protect you. The underlying core of these movements isn't to take care of your kids. They can care less about your kids. That's why they'll send them to Bosnia and have them unload rice from trucks. And despite the fact that they're trained to throw hand grenades and shoot AR-15s, they don't let them shoot back. Does that sound like they care about your kids? Huh? They're going to send them out and let them live in the desert to help a country that don't want their help. This stuff isn't new. George Josianiah said it. If you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it. This way, most opposition meetings, newspapers, were prevented from reaching the public. He signed an emergency decree giving the government the right to prohibit and control meetings, uniforms, and newspapers. Now tell me that the uniform of the Boy Scouts is popular today. What were Boy Scouts famous for in the past? Helping old ladies across the street? Huh? Starting campfires with sticks? Right? Now what are they famous for? They don't like homos. Right? I mean, and the Boy Scouts are on the news. What are they on there for? They don't like homosexuals. Isn't that what they're on the news for? What happened to all the virtuous things about the Boy Scouts? I mean, suddenly a kid wears a uniform, a Boy Scout uniform, and they insult them. During the inauguration, they usually have a bunch of Boy Scouts. People didn't want the Boy Scouts. What's wrong with that uniform that represents kids that are clean, that live to a creed that puts God first, puts their family first? What's wrong with that uniform that suddenly nobody wants them on the platform with the president? Huh? They want to ban uniforms. They want to control your mind. Well, we'll leave that one go. I'm just telling you, this stuff isn't new. How do you control the people? You control what they see. You control what they are by what they wear. You're not going to get somebody who's rogue. You know, one of the things about the 60s was that you knew a hippie when you saw him. Huh? You knew they dropped out of society. You could smell them too. People decided they didn't like that uniform. They didn't like their hairdos. If you're long-haired, don't come in. If you got earrings, don't come in. I want you all to look the same. This attack on the opposition from above was accompanied by a violent assault from below carried out by the SA. These are their stormtroopers. In desperate attacks in which 18 Nazis and 51 opposition members were killed, all communists, most socialists, many center party meetings were disrupted. In spite of all this, it's evident a week before the election that the German people were not convinced. Accordingly, under the circumstances, which are still mysterious, a plot was worked out to burn the Reichstag building and then blame the communists. Now, listen to this. They're going to burn the Reichstag. They're going to burn this government building. And they're going to blame the communists. Now, what's going to happen to the communists? Now, Nero started Rome on fire. Who did he blame? Now, is this old? Tim McVeigh blows up the Murrah building. And right-wing Christians. Did Tim McVeigh say he was a Christian? Huh? He did it for Waco. Huh? Right wing, flag waving. Man, I'm defending the rights of the Constitution for what the government did to Waco. So what do they think of? I'll tell you what do they think of somebody like me? Huh? They're going to burn the Reichstag and they're going to blame the communists so they can get rid of them. Now, we know who blew up the Twin Towers. See, religion's dangerous. Don't you know that? Religion is dangerous. You get people focused on God and God knows what they'll do. This isn't just an attack on Muslims. It's that brainwashing. They think they're going to Allah. 72 virgins waiting for them. See, the only question I have is, what do they look like? Because if they stayed virgins in this life, they must be the fat, ugly ones. I'll let that one go. Accordingly, under the circumstances still mysterious, a plot was worked out to burn the Reichstag building, to blame the communists. Again, this stuff isn't old. This stuff repeats itself. The Christians took the rap for Rome burning. Nero did it. They're going to burn the Reichstag and blame the communists. Most of the plotters were homosexuals. And they were able to persuade a degenerate moron from Holland named Vanderloob to go with them. After the building was set on fire, Vanderloob was left wandering about in it and was arrested by the police. They always find a patsy. The government at once arrested 4 communists, including the party leader at the Reichstag, Ernest Torgler. The day following the fire, February 28, 1933, Hindenburg signed a decree suspending all civil liberties and giving government power to invade personal privacy, including the right to search private homes, confiscate property. At once, all communist members at the Reichstag, as well as thousands of others, were arrested, and all the communist social democrat papers were suspended for 2 weeks. So something like this happens, and immediately, what's the knee-jerk response? No civil liberties. Now, see, you read this, and you say, that was Germany. You read about Russia, you say, that's Russia. What's happening today? But people don't tell you that. Nobody believes it. The true story of the Reichstag fire was kept secret only with difficulty. Several persons who knew the truth, including a nationalist Reichstag member, Dr. Oberfohren, were murdered in March and April to prevent their circulating the true story. Most of the Nazis who were in on the plot were murdered by Göring during the Blood Purge of 1934. 4 communists who were directly charged with the crime were acquitted by regular German courts, although Vanderloob was convicted. Here's Hitler. Let's skip over some. Good story here. Religion was coordinated in various ways. The evangelical church was reorganized. When a non-Nazi Friedrich von Bodelschwing was elected Reichsbishop in 1933, he was forcibly removed from office, and the National Synod was forced to elect a Nazi, Ludwig Müller, in his place. At the elections for the church assemblies in July 1933, government pressure was so great that a majority of the Nazis were chosen in each. In 1935, a Ministry of Church Affairs under Hans Carroll was set up with power to issue the church ordinances, having the force of law with him to have complete control over the church property and funds. Prominent Protestant leaders like Martin Niemöller, who objected to these steps, was arrested and sent to a concentration camp. So, who takes over the church? Huh? The government. The state takes over the church. The Catholic Church made every effort to cooperate with the Nazis, but soon found it was impossible. It withdrew its condemnation of Nazism on March 28, 1933, and signed a concordat with von Papen on July 20th. So, the Catholics said, we don't want to get overrun like these Protestants. We want peace. Huh? We'll sign a deal with you. See, I don't know what's worse. Those evangelicals that just bent over, or the Catholics who signed up for peace. Because you can't make peace with people like this. And yet now listen, this is exactly what the church does today. Those evangelicals, they're the same. They're still bending over. Huh? Those good-for-nothing people, those evangelicals, they're good for nothing. They've done more damage to the body of Christ and Christianity than anybody else than Hitler. They withdrew his condemnation of Nazism March 28, 1933. How can you stop condemning it? Sign a concordat with von Papen on July 20. By this agreement, the state recognized freedom of religious beliefs and worship. Now, isn't that something? You sign a deal with them, and they say, now you can have freedom of worship. I'm going to tell you what, in the last days, these same folk are going to take the mark. Huh? They're going to make a deal. Listen, this is what's wrong with our country today. You know, when we talk about things such as tolerance, and I've talked about tolerance before, it's a damnable humanistic heresy. You know what tolerance means? Tolerance means you don't believe in nothing. They're homosexuals. What do you think? Oh, I tolerate them. You know what that means? You have no opinion, you worthless human being. What do you think of this political notion that women need to become the heads of households? Oh, I have no opinion. I just tolerate them. What a worthless human being. Huh? You have no opinion. You got nothing to stand on. This is why women are taking power, because men don't have any. They're a bunch of wusses. They're worse than women, especially in the church. They don't want to stand up for what's right anymore. Everybody, just tolerate them. Listen, man, I haven't read anything. You know, everybody always brings up the Christian Inquisition. Sure, Christians were stupid. I have no doubt. But you never hear about Christians tying dynamite to themselves and blowing people up that are innocent. Do you? You don't hear about Christians loading up a raft with explosives and blowing up somebody's ship, do you? Huh? You don't read about Christians tying bombs to children and sending them into the marketplace, do you? Who does stuff like that? When was the last time a Christian got on an airliner and blew himself out of the sky with everybody on it? When was the last time that happened? And you're expected to tolerate these rogue Muslims? Huh? I believe in patriarchy. But I don't believe in that Taliban lock your woman up and dressed in black and paint your windows. And you're supposed to tolerate that? Get the hell out of here. Huh? Oh yeah, they're lesbians. Let them come. We want all the lesbians. We tolerate everybody. She don't take the pill. She gets abortions every time she gets pregnant. Oh, brother, you got to be tolerant. What does that mean? It means you don't believe in nothing. It means you don't stand for nothing. What does tolerance mean? What does tolerance come to mean in this age? If you don't have tolerance, what are you? You're a bigot, right? You're a racist. You're a fascist. You're a Christian. Huh? And everybody's afraid, so we want to tolerate. It's the exact same thing. I guess some folk too dumb, but the Catholic Church suddenly signs a concordat with the Nazis, and they get freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religious worship, belief, exemption from the clergy, from civic duties, the right of the church to manage its own affairs and establish denominational schools. Governors of the German states were given the right to object to nominations to the highest clerical posts. Bishops, they had to take an oath of loyalty, and education was to continue to function as it had been doing. Those Catholics, boy, they sure know how to, fly under the radar, huh? It's probably where the French learned it. I'll tell you, that's it. First thing I'd do if I was the Pope, I'd make them wear pants. That way, hiking up that robe ain't so easy. This agreement with the church began to break down almost at once. Within 10 days of the signing of the Concordat, the Nazis began to attack the Catholic Youth League and the Catholic press. Now, what did we just read in the Maccabees? Politics isn't your friend. Politicians don't like you. Suddenly they don't like your Catholic Youth League, Catholic press. Church schools were restricted. Members of the clergy were arrested and tried on charges of evading monetary foreign exchange regulations and of immorality. Well, they had it back here. The church condemned the efforts of Nazis like Rosenberg to replace Christianity by revived German paganism, such laws as permitting sterilization of socially objectionable persons. Now, remember we were reading about that? Where did they learn the idea of preserving genes and genetics. Remember the Harrimans and the Bushes? Huh? The Rockefellers? The eugenics projects? Now, why does it surprise you the Germans pick it up? Catholic scholars exposed its errors in a series of studies in 1934. Following March 14, 1937, Pope Pius XI condemned many of the tenets of Nazism in the encyclical Mit Berender Sorge. Attempts to coordinate the civil service began with the law of April 7, 1933, continued to the end of the regime without ever being completely successful because of the lack of capable personnel who were loyal to Nazis. Non-Aryans, Jews, or persons married to non-Aryans politically were unreliable persons, and the Marxists were discharged, and loyalty to Nazism was required for an appointment to promotion in civil service. Skip a little. By the spring of 1934, the problem with the SA, that's the stormtroopers, had become so acute since it was organized directly challenging two members of the quartet, the army and the industry. Industry was being challenged by the demand of the SA for a second revolution. That is, for the economic reforms which would justify the use of the word socialism in the name of National Socialism. The army was being challenged by the demand of Captain Rome that the SA be incorporated into the Reichswehr, with each officer holding the same rank in the latter as he already held in the former. Since the Reichswehr was only 300,000 men, while the SA had 3 million, this would have swamped the officers' corps. Hitler had denounced this project on July 1933, and Frick repeated this 10 days later. Nevertheless, Rome repeated his demand on April 1934 and was echoed by Edmund Heinz and Karl Ernst. In full cabinet meeting, Minister of War General von Blomberg refused. Tense development occurred. If Hindenburg died, the Reichswehr might have liquidated the Nazis and restored monarchy. On June 21st, Hindenburg ordered Blomberg to use the army if necessary to restore order in the country. This was regarded as a threat to the SA. Accordingly, Hitler made a deal to destroy the SA in return for a free hand to deal with the presidency when it became vacant. This was done. A meeting of the SA leaders was called by Hitler June 30, 1934 in Bad Weiss in Bavaria. The SS under Hitler's personal command arrested the SA leaders in the middle of the night and shot most of them at once. In Berlin, Göring did the same thing to the SA leaders there. Both Hitler and Göring also killed most of their personal enemies. The Reichstag incendiaries, Gregor Strasser, General and Mrs. von Schleider, all of von Papen's close associates, Gustav von Kahr, and all those who had known Hitler from the early days of his failure, and many others. Papen escaped only by a narrow margin. In all, several thousand were eliminated in this blood purge. 2 excuses were given for this violent action: that he murdered the men because they were homosexuals, something that had been known for years, and that they were members of a conspiracy to murder Hitler. Let's stop right there real quick, and we're going to read something that we've talked about a little. Captured the cultural institutions of the American Republic goes far beyond the 1960s to August 1914. What else happened in 1913-14? Federal Reserve. All right. 1914 is a date famous because World War I began in 1914. August 4, 1914, Social Democrats stood in the Reichstag and to a man voted the Kaiser's war credits, joining the orgy of patriotism. As the armies of the Reich smashed into Belgium, Marxists were stunned. The long-anticipated European war was to be their time. Workers of the world unite, Marx had thundered in the closing of his Communist Manifesto. Now again, Marx and Engels, Karl Marx was a son of rabbis. Engels, Englishman. Where did this manifesto come from? Where did these ideas come from? Came from the West. The whole idea that the workers were everything. The whole notion that this bourgeoisie, this top-heavy group of people with all the money, they shouldn't have power. And Marx's cry was, workers of the world unite. What was he saying? He was hoping that when war broke out, that all the workers, despite your nationality, would somehow join together to conquer the rich. Marxists had confidently predicted that when war came, the workers would rise up and rebel against their rulers rather than fight their fellow workers in neighboring nations. But it didn't happen. The greatest socialist party in Europe had been converted into a war party, and the workers had thrown down their tools and gone off to fight with songs in their hearts. As historian Barbara Tuchman describes it, when the call came, the worker, whom Marx declared had no fatherland, identified himself with the country, not the class. He turned out to be a member of the national family like anyone else. The force of his antagonism, which was supposed to topple capitalism, found a better target in the foreigner. The working class went to war willingly, even eagerly, like the middle class, like the upper class, like the species. So the whole notion that these workers were going to unite and go out and despite national boundaries, that they were going to fight and topple the capitalists, it never happened. And this is what Karl Marx was looking for. Marxists had been exposed as fools. Now, see, everybody knows that the revolution failed. But see, we know better than just to think that when Trotsky returned, when Marx returned, when Lenin returned, that we already know better than to think that when they got to Petrograd, that they completely turned Russia socialist simply because Petrograd fell. We know there were literally other factors that were involved with this, specifically all that money from the West. As the horrors of the Western Front unfolded, they waited. But even Ypres Passchendaele and the Somme, where hundreds of thousands of British soldiers went to their deaths only over a few yards of mud, did not cause the workers to rise up in their homeland of the Industrial Revolution. Neither did the French or the German working class break off at Verdun. In 1917, mutiny in the French trenches was swiftly put down. New blows came at war's end. After the Russian Revolution, communist coups were attempted in Budapest, Munich, Berlin. The Bavarian Soviet was quickly crushed by German war veterans. Rosa Luxemburg, who had helped lead the Spartacist uprising, and Karl Leibniz were clubbed and shot to death in Berlin by Freikorps. The Budapest regime of Bela Kun lasted a few months, but the workers failed to rally in the revolutions that were launched in their name. Trotsky sought to make the Red Army the spear point of revolution, invading Poland, and he was hurled back at the Vistula by the Polish patriots under Marshal Pilsudski. Nothing the Marxists had predicted ever came to pass. The hour had come and gone. The workers of the West, the mythical proletariat, had refused to play the role in history that was assigned to them. How could have Marx been so wrong? Now, this is what the question is. Why did this not happen? If this was the time of this great uprising that was predicted, why didn't it happen? Well, two of Marx's disciples now advanced an explanation. Yes, Marx was wrong. Capitalism was not impoverishing the workers. See, this was the lie. And that is that the bosses have money, you're just the worker, you'll always stay poor. What happened was that it was a lie. Let me ask you this. How many times do you hear people say, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer? Listen, is that true? Listen, looking back, we weren't rich. And we were probably on the lower spectrum of the middle class. There was a time when I can say we were poor, but my mom and dad did a good job not letting us know. All right? About the only hint I got was that my bike was used when I got it. All right? Every once in a while I get a pair of shoes that somebody else had worn. That was about my only indication we were poor. Other than that, I think we did okay. We always had food. I don't know how they made ends meet, but we didn't have all that much. I don't mind telling you, my mom has got a grip of cash. All right? The poor don't stay poor. How many of you know that now? A lot of you probably come from the same background. You come from poorness, but we ain't poor no more. I was down in Mexico preaching one time, and some lady came up to me and said, because I had made mention that we're not rich. I had made mention, we're not American rich people like you think. And she came to me after service and said, if y'all ain't rich, why y'all got brand new cars? And I walked out and I looked at the line of cars. And this was during the time when our cars were new. And Danny got a new car. I had a new car. Dan had a new car. Everybody had a new car. And I'm sitting out there looking. I said, well, bless God. Look at our church. My goodness. Look at our church. Yeah, I just got here. Bless God. I sat there looking at all this line of cars. And that lady had a point. The rich, in fact, the rich get richer. The rich get richer because the poor get richer. Do you know who buys all the stuff? Poor people. Hey, listen, I hate to say this, but do you know who gets screwed in a sales deal? Rich people don't get screwed in sales deals. Me and Charles were talking about this. Rich people, they're always looking for a deal. In fact, me and Danny know rich people don't want to pay. We get these NFL football players come in the office, they say, it ain't free. You know, when a poor person goes and buys a car from Ugly Duckling, he's paying 21%. They don't buy their TV from the king of big screens. They buy theirs from the Rent-A-Center, where they think $50 a week is a good deal. Huh? That's $200 a month. If they're so poor, how can they afford that? The rich get richer. Why? Because the poor are getting richer. They're making more money. I'll just leave that one alone. All All right, capitalism was not impoverishing the workers. Indeed, their lot was improving, and they had not risen in the revolution because their souls had been saturated in 2,000 years' worth of Christianity that blinded them to their true class interests. So, what was the blame for them not uprising and taking their time in history? They had a root of Christianity in them. Why didn't communism take over the world when the time was right for revolution to occur? Why didn't it happen? Because 2,000 years of Christianity had been in Europe. These Marxists now are forced to explain why this proletariat movement, this great revolution, didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because these people had a root of Christianity in them. Indeed, their lot was improving, but they had not risen in revolution because their souls had been saturated in 2,000 years of Christianity. Now, listen, if your attempt to change the world failed because of Christianity, what do you have to do before you take over the world? Now, do you think people are going to stand up and say, we hate Christians? Or are they going to get up and say, let's be tolerant? They're going to get up and say something like, come on, we need relationship. Come on, we need integrity and character. When every character in the Bible proves that they fall short of integrity and character more than anybody. Huh? How are they destroying the church? Let's read some more. Unless and until Christianity and Western culture, the immune system of capitalism, were uprooted from the souls of Western men, Marxism can't take root. Look, man, they're telling you why they failed. Unless and until Christianity and Western culture, the immune system of capitalism. Now listen to this strong wording. It's the immune system of capitalism. It is under Christianity, Judeo-Christian work, that framework, that capitalism was born, or at least that capitalism that had been literally moved from Babylon across the Caucasus into Europe with these bankers. Apart from that Judeo-Christian root, capitalism would not have flourished. Now, by the way, who founded capitalism? We talked about this. Remember, kaput means the head? It was Babylon. The framework behind capitalism is what? This Judeo-Christian root. In America, what made the Puritans work? Wasn't it their work ethic that God is with us? The notion of manifest destiny? The notion that we're prosperous in Europe. Everywhere the Anglo-Saxon goes, he prospers. Now, against what backdrop did these people work hard and prosper? It's against the backdrop of God is with me. So these people that were supposed to rise up as the workers, regardless of nationality, it never happened. They never took their place in history. Why? Well, they came to the conclusion. Christianity kept it from happening. Unless and until Christianity and Western culture, the immune system of capitalism, were uprooted. Now listen, not only Christianity, but Western culture. Western culture. Listen, I'm brown. Some of you are black. Some of you got other stuff in you. But listen, why is there such a move to get rid of Western culture? Think about this. I'm going to ask a simple question. The Mexican culture, other than the fact that they're driven and motivated by money, listen, this is just the motivation of Latinos. This is the motivation of Latin people. You know why they stand out and sell oranges on the freeway? Because they're moved and motivated by the idea, I can make some money. Right? You know why they bust tables? You know why they pick lettuce? Huh? The most menial of jobs. Why? You know, your car gets attacked with 9 Mexicans in a jumpsuit at the end of the car wash? Why do these people do that type of work? What motivates Hispanics? The notion that I can make my money and buy my house. I can make my money and become something. That I can make my money and raise a family in this nation where dreams can become reality. This is what motivates Hispanics. The idea of money. Now, if suddenly I stand up and say, listen up, Hispanics. We got to bring back pyramids. basket weaving, tribal fighting. That sun god dude that sits like this. We got to restore our names. I'm no longer Daniel. My name is Huahuahuatec. And then white people, there's always those white people. Yo, I'm down with you, bro. Go, What are they trying to get rid of? Think about this. African American. We got to be African American. What is the whole purpose? What are they destroying? Western culture. What is Western culture? It is the backbone that resists the oppression of the system. Now, see, this is what pisses people off, especially if you've got color on your skin. And as we read, you're going to find that Nazism, one of the main reasons that it failed was because the Christian nations resisted it. And it wasn't until the greatest of the Christian nations decided to enter the war, even despite the manipulations of Churchill and the other politicians, the string pulling by the international bankers. Despite that, it wasn't until America entered the war. When did America become the world power? After the war. I'm just telling you, there's a lot more to these stories than people think. There's a lot more than meets the eye. But I'm just saying that it's the church, it's Western culture and Christianity that becomes literally the framework by which we're able to resist the Antichrist, resist these powers. And the more we play these games based on racial divide, the more entrenched we become, or the more we lose sight of what God is doing and fall under the spell of these particular oppressing governments. And I'm not going to say oppressing governments, I'm going to say this oppressing zeitgeist that's sole design is to do away with Christianity. So until the immune system of capitalism were uprooted from the soul of Western man, Marxism can't take root, and the revolution would be betrayed by the workers in whose name is to be fought. In biblical terms, the words of Marx, the seed of revolution had fallen on rock-hard Christian soil and died. See, the seed of that word couldn't germinate in the hearts of Christians because their heart was hardened to the false message. And see, as long as we're playing tolerance, you're allowing the seed to sit in there. And you're allowing that seed to germinate. As long as you get the interest, that idea of, integrity, character, according to the worldview, you're allowing that seed of that word to get into your heart and begin to germinate that which God never intended. And then we become nothing more than pawns in this game. This is why he says equality suddenly has a different meaning. There is no equality. There's no equality in God. In my Father's house, there's many mansions. Some don't get one. There ain't no equality in God. He don't blind you like he did Paul. He don't give some people chances like Peter gets to deny him 3 times, but Ananias and Sapphira robbed God once and they're dead. This whole notion of equality. You let the system change the meaning of words, and that word begins to take root in our hearts, and it begins to produce that harvest that God hates. And he even has that special interest in them at the end times for Babylon. If we want to go around playing all these color games, that's why I get mad at these idiots. Want to talk about, Christianity and race. Let's all hold hands. In biblical terms, the word of Marx, the seed of the revolution had fallen on rock-hard Christian soil and died, wagering everything on the working class. The Marxists had bet on the wrong horse. The first descending disciple was the Hungarian George Lucas, not the Star Wars guy, an agent of the Comintern, whose history and class consciousness had brought him recognition. That's his writing, that's his book. As a Marxist theorist to rival Marx himself. I saw the revolutionary destruction of society as the one and only solution, said Lukács. A worldwide overturning of values cannot take place without the annihilation of the old values and the creation of new ones by revolutionaries. As deputy commissar for culture in Bela Kun's regime, Lukács put his self-described demonic ideas into action by what came to be known as cultural terrorism. So Lukács comes in and Lukács says, hey, listen, here's how you do it. He says, I have to put my demoniac ideas to work. If you're going to put down the framework that resists Marxism and socialism, now what is the framework that holds that? Western thought and Christianity. As a part of this terrorism, he instituted a radical sex education program in Hungarian schools. Wait a minute. In order to break down Western thought and Christianity, a cultural terrorist first does what? Institutes a radical sex education program in Hungarian schools. Children were instructed in free love, sexual intercourse, archaic nature of the middle-class family codes, the outdatedness of monogamy, the irrelevance of religion, which deprives man of all pleasures. Women, too, were called to rebel against the sexual mores of the time. That sounds like us. Every one of these points sounds like us. Does it sound like Lukács knew what he was talking about? It failed on their continent, but what about here? So if every one of these issues is a reality in our country today, what is the end result of this? You're going to break down, we're going to lose the framework that literally holds up or gives us the ability to resist Antichrist. Western culture and Christianity. Now, to an extent, you can't separate the two. Western culture. What's Western culture? All you got to do is talk to an Italian. Family, man. Right? Talk to some Europeans. Ask them. Everything's about the family. Well, not anymore. They took up after the French. When you talk about Western culture and its effects, America depicts all of that. Family, God, nation. How do you break that down? It's Western culture. How do you break that down? Well, you start with teaching kids sex ed. This is why I tell you, schools are nothing more than the catechisms for the system of the devil. They're nothing more than the school for the system of the Antichrist. That's what schools are. The public school. Check this out. If you're a teacher and you give a kid a rubber, you're a hero. Right? But if you give a kid a cigarette, what happens? They say, oh, you're endangering his health. And give him a condom doesn't? Why is this stuff in school? Lukács' purpose in promoting licentiousness among women and children was to destroy the family. Now, isn't that something? Their goal is to break down Western culture, and this is in Europe, Western culture and Christianity, apart from which you can't introduce socialism, you can't introduce Marxism, you can't introduce these ideas of communism, because there's too many years of Western culture and Christianity put in. Lukács' purpose in promoting licentiousness among women and children was to destroy the family, the core institution of Christianity and Western culture. Now, we'll stop here because we're out of time, but listen. Why is the family under attack in this country today? Huh? Same plan, same plot. Again, we're still talking about Hitler. We're going to talk a little more about his pedigree, but we just got off a little off the beaten path, and we started to read about how he took power. The devil doesn't play fair. His whole notion of taking power is to take control over what you hear, take control over what you see, take control over what you think about. It's no different than what it is today. The American people think they're well informed because they read the Los Angeles Times. You know how many stories the LA Times leaves out? The LA Times doesn't tell you the truth. Huh? Some people think they're informed politically because they read page, section C. You really think you're going to understand politics because you read a review of a legislation? You read the opinion page? The devil doesn't play, man. He ain't playing. These people who have established this system, they're not playing. Their number one enemy is the church. And tossed in with that church is what we refer to as Western culture. That which has been vilified. That's why everybody wants to tell you how Western culture has done nothing but rape and pillage. I mean, think about it. We've come into a system in our country where, Thomas Jefferson isn't a hero anymore. George Washington isn't a hero anymore. Because everybody says, because they're white guys. And what do these white guys bring us? They gave us everything we possess, but everybody's telling us how bad they are. What are they really trying to get rid of? Western culture, Christianity. This is how they take over the minds. They ain't playing, they use the schools. I don't know about you, but that's always driven me crazy. Isn't it funny how teachers, they're the most mind-bendable people on the planet? How come teachers aren't smart enough to say, I don't give a rat's behind about a dolphin. I'm not teaching that. How come teachers don't say something like, hey, look, you take your kids and you write no drugs on the chain link fence. I'm going to teach my kids how to read. Huh? Because teachers are, the least respected segment of academics is the teaching section of every major university. That's the most least respected educational wing of any major university, is the educational department. Because people who become teachers usually couldn't become anything else. I'm just telling you I'm just telling you that the way it works. The weakest aspect of academics. It's no wonder that these people are concerned with the rainforest more than teaching Johnny how to read, how to think. It's no wonder. They sitting there turning your kid into a snitch. Think they know better. I don't like the idea of schools becoming the catechism for the devil system. But that's how it is. That's what it's about. We read about the Jews in Russia. How were the Russians going to bring the Jews under control? Take over the schools. How the Nazis take over the minds of the people? You take over the schools. How the Marxists determined they were going to bring about revolution? You take over the schools. Now tell me that the schools in this country aren't under siege and haven't been under siege for the last 50 years. Huh? How come people don't drop out of college anymore? Why don't they drop out and say, hey, you know what? Screw society like they did in the 60s. Because they don't teach you what they taught you in the 60s anymore. That's why I get upset. You want to learn about Chicano studies? Go to the damn library. I would be highly disappointed if I ever had a kid who says, I'm going to go major in Chicano studies. If you are, use your own money. I ain't paying you a penny, because that's the last thing you ever need to know. I majored in black studies. What you going to do now? Huh? What are you doing? Why do these systems, these educational societies even sanction this stuff as if it's going to do you or your people any good? Huh? What are they trying? What is the real plot here? You get rid of Western culture and you get rid of Christianity. Then what you do? What happens? Now you got revolution. Now you have nothing. And then somebody like Philip Drew gets to stand up and become administrator. Huh? I'm not the only one that sees this coming. I'm not the only one that sees this. I'm not the only one that understands that these people sitting here spearheading even all these minority movements, they're not nothing more than puppets and a bunch of jerkwads on the take. That's all they are. Got some guy up there saying, we want bilingual education. You know what they're saying? Make me head of the bilingual department so I can make more money. Do I know how hard it is for a kid who doesn't speak a lot of English to end up doing well in school? All you got to do is look at your pastor. I didn't need no jerkwad, knucklehead lady talking to me in half Spanish. Our nanny has a nephew. Been brought up in a Spanish house. And he comes down to my house to spend time with my daughters every once in a while. He watches Digimon, Pokemon. He understands what they're saying. He don't need no fat lady with taco breath interpreting Digimon for him. You know, for 2 years, bilingual education has been put down. You know, the test scores they skyrocketed, went through the roof. All that stuff does is cripple a people. These people are nothing more than puppets. This is the plot to destroy Western culture. Listen, and it's Western culture that gives us everything we have. Don't let people tell you it's not. And again, when I say Western culture, am I saying that this white European culture is the best? Where did God and the blessing go? Huh? North, west, through these people. Now again, did God bless them because they're white? No. Did he bless them because they ended up in Europe? No. Did he bless them because they were Germanic, British, or Scottish? No. Why did he bless them? Because who are they really? Israel. Huh? He scattered them he scattered them like the wind, but he knows where to pick them up. Why is there a blessing on this nation? Because of who we are. And if we want to play stupid games, and if we want to sit here playing, color race games, we're nothing more than puppets. And if we want to play this equality game with these new definitions, what's the first thing Hitler did when he came to power? He changed the meanings of words. Equality doesn't mean what it means. People have been taking Jefferson out of context. Jefferson said, all men were created equal. That's true. But are all men equal? What makes a man unequal to another? It's his gifts and talents and what he does to them. I mean, even we, as men, we understand sports. Not everybody is equal to Michael Jordan. Huh? Not everybody was like Reggie Jackson, who can come up to the plate in the World Series and hit it out of the park. Men are not all equal. But what was Jefferson? What did these founding fathers say? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, that they've been endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, God-given unalienable rights. What are they? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. What does that mean? That we're all created equal, that we all equally deserve the right to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That we all have this right. But did he say we're all equal? No. But you have people who teach equality. Or this false form of equality that says that everything's egalitarian, that we're all going to peak out and be the same somewhere. Are we? Now let's go to the church. Who are the light bearers? Benjamites. You can be brown, you can be black, you can be pink. And you can cry all you want about, I want to be like Billy Graham, like some idiot we know. I want to be like Kenneth Hagin, or I want to be like, Reinhard Bonnke. Is it going to happen? No. Why not? Why not? Because it's not their destiny. All I'm saying is that we're going to fall for all this crap, and the church is already tied up and meshed in all this junk, and this is why they're missing God. I think that God's going to raise up some people that despite color, despite ethnicity, there's going to be some people that are willing to speak the truth. There's going to be some people that are willing to take this stewardship. And again, they're going to take this stewardship because for the most part, the white Anglo-Saxon has failed. And that he brought the gospel, but then settled into a system where, in essence, greed, avarice, and all the, the blessings. I mean, it's just like the Jews. You get so hung up on the blessings that you forget about your major call. If we're going to play games and talk bad about Western culture and Christianity, which in essence is the framework that withholds Antichrist, that withholds that system, we're actually being more destructive to the plan of God than we are being constructive to the purpose of God. And we can play all those foolish games we want and miss God, because that's not what God's about. So we're going to read some more. I'm just teaching you, just like what it says in the book of Maccabees. The devil uses the same device over and over and over, and you'll see it repeatable. You'll see it repeating in history, repeating in history, repeating in history. And if you understand how the devil works, then you'll understand how to whoop his butt. All right? If you understand how he works, then you understand how he's coming. All right? People look at you as a Christian, and they say you're narrow-minded, you're a bigot, screw you. No, screw them. You know, if you say something like, what do you think of homosexuals? You say, I don't think about homosexuals. Let God judge them. But God says they're going to hell. Now, what's the first? Now, are they going to argue with that rationale? Do they argue with you? No. What do they call you? You're a homophobe. Now, how do you argue with that? Now, how come you can be a homophobe, but they can't be a Christian phobe? Huh? How can they say to you, how dare you judge, when they're judging you? So, as Christians understanding this system, before they get a chance to say, you're bigot, you mean-spirited, you're homophobe, we need to learn to say, screw you. Get out of my face, you bigot. You piece of crap. You Christian phobe. And see, now they're forced to defend and prove they're not. Because that's the game they play on us. See, we make rational argument. They can't intellectually or intelligently argue that point, but what they say, you're a bigot, mean-spirited. You're a racist. And now the logic and the intelligence of God is on the back burner because now you got to prove, I ain't got no problem with black people or brown people. I don't dislike gays. And all intelligence is thrown out the window. So knowing the way the devil works, knowing the way these systems work, how do you deal with people like that? You call them names first. Now you go to hell, you Christian folk. You go to hell. Hey, the media doesn't like Christians. That's why they call Christians anti-abortionists. How come the guys that like having abortions get a nice name like pro-choice? Huh? How come they get nice names? If you hold fast to these truths, they call you hard line. And they get things like innovative thinkers. Huh? Well, I think a dude screwing another dude is just another form of relationship. Says, wow, that's innovative. Charles, you narrow-minded, judgmental jerk. Why do they get all the good names and we get all the bad? See, I'm telling you, it throws all logic, all common sense, all intelligence out the window because you're now forced to defend the name calling. So I'm saying, screw them. Call them the name first. Oh, I perceive you like homosexuals. Are you a homosexual? Is this pro-abortion thing that you stand for? Is this out of personal experience? How many girls do you knock up and pay for their abortion? Did your mother have a couple? I'm just telling you, this is the way they do us. I'm just telling you, what we're going to learn from this. We see how the devil works. And it works consistently all the time. Are you a racist? No. Did your parents have slaves? How many Mexicans did you run off the rancho? Huh? I'm just saying, turnabout's fair play. I kick the devil's teeth in. Don't put up with this crap. Some of these people, they can't deal intelligently. That's why they got to come out with that stuff. That's why every time somebody says something, oh, you mean-spirited. Jesse Jackson knocks up a woman. He says, you judging me? Don't be mean-spirited. What kind of crap is that? What's that do to him? Huh? We can't be those wusses on the defense, always getting rocked on our heels. You know, people bending over for the Nazis, bending over for the socialists, bending over for all these. We can't be that type of church. We can't be that type of Christian. We've got to be able to understand how the devil works and how the devil plays and basically take it to him. All of this is, and there's many more examples of this. But Hitler changes meaning to words no different than anybody else does. This is why people talk about equality. We want equality. What does that mean? You want equality? Go design another form of Microsoft somewhere in another field. Then you'll be equal. Go out and create something. Then you'll be equal. Go educate your mind. And then we can compete fairly. But don't just say you want equality without being equal to nothing. I want to be equal. Charles is a cop. How are you going to be equal? You can't even read. I want equality. I want to make $14 million like these basketball players. You ever shoot a ball? No. See, this whole notion, it's just bull crap. The founding fathers understood equality, and that is opportunity. Opportunity, equality and opportunity. That we've all been endowed by a Creator with certain inalienable rights. These are God-given, they recognize it. Doesn't mean we're the same, because we all possess different gifts and talents, and even Jesus and Paul understood that. And it's what you do with those gifts and talents that give you your value on this planet. It's those things that put you on a different plane from other people. And God recognizes that some people in the kingdom are more valuable than others. This is nothing more than the zeitgeist, the changing of words. And if we allow these words to take root in our hearts and become part of our vocabulary, like even the big word, potential, that has no part in our vocabulary, because we all like sheep have gone astray. There's none perfect, no, not one.